Farmer lived alone for years, until 6 women asked for protection from a storm. He looked at them through the crack in his door, rain soaking their torn dresses, mud caked on their boots, desperation carved into their faces. But Thaddeus Crow hadn't opened his door to strangers in 12 years, and he wasn't about to start now. The thunder cracked like a whip across the empty plains, and the woman at the front, tall, dark-haired with eyes that had seen too much, pressed her palm against his door. "Please, sir, just until morning. We have nowhere else to go." Thaddeus tightened his grip on the rifle behind the door. 6 women, 6 strangers, 6 reasons his carefully built walls could come crashing down. He'd learned the hard way that letting people in meant letting pain follow. The scars on his hands were proof enough of that lesson. "Roads that way," he said through the wood, his voice rough from years of talking only to himself and his livestock. "Town's 15 miles south. The bridge is washed out," another voice called, younger, trembling. "We tried to cross, but the water's too high. Our wagon's stuck in the mud." Through the crack, Thaddeus saw the youngest one, barely more than a girl, her hand pressed to her rounded belly. Pregnant. His chest tightened against his will. But pregnancy meant complications, meant responsibility, meant the kind of chaos that destroyed men like him. "That ain't my problem," he said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. The older woman stepped forward then, gray hair plastered to her skull but her spine straight as a fence post. "Name's Bertie Walsh. This here's my granddaughter Clementine, and these are our traveling companions." "We're not asking for charity, mister. We can pay." "Payment?" Thaddeus almost laughed. What could they possibly offer that would be worth the risk? Worth breaking the silence that had kept him sane? Worth opening the door to the kind of trouble that followed groups of desperate people? The rain hammered harder, turning to hail that pelted the roof like angry fists. Through the storm, he heard something else, the distant howl of wolves. His blood chilled. The pack had been growing bolder lately, coming closer to the farmhouse when hunger drove them down from the hills. "You hear that?" Magnolia's voice cut through the storm. "Those aren't dogs." Thaddeus closed his eyes. 12 years of perfect isolation, 12 years of controlled peace. And now 6 strangers stood on his porch with wolves circling and a storm that showed no mercy. The pregnant girl let out a small cry of pain, doubling over. Bertie caught her, shooting a desperate look at the door. "She's been having pain since the afternoon. The cold and wet ain't helping." That decided it, not his conscience. He'd buried that deep enough. But practicality. A woman giving birth in a storm with wolves nearby meant screaming, meant blood, meant the kind of attention that would bring every predator for miles. Thaddeus pulled back the 3 heavy bolts he'd installed after the last time he'd trusted strangers. The door creaked open, revealing his weathered face and suspicious eyes. "One night," he said, stepping aside just enough to let them pass. "Soon as the storm breaks, you're gone." But as the 6 women hurried past him into the warmth of his cabin, tracking mud and secrets across his clean floors, Thaddeus felt something shift in the air, something that had nothing to do with the weather outside. Because what none of them knew yet was that this storm wasn't the only thing hunting them, and by morning one of these women would be gone forever. The women spread through his cabin like water finding cracks in stone. Magnolia took charge immediately, helping Clementine to the chair closest to the fire while Bertie examined the pregnant girl with practiced hands. The other 3, sisters by their similar features, huddled together near the wall, whispering in voices too low for Thaddeus to catch. He watched from the corner, rifle still in his hands, as they shed their soaked cloaks and revealed the truth beneath their desperate appearance. These weren't ordinary travelers. Magnolia wore a dress that, despite the mud and rain, showed quality stitching. The sisters carried themselves with the careful posture of women who'd known wealth. And Bertie's hands, though weathered, bore the calluses of a seamstress, not a farm worker. "You're running from something," Thaddeus said. It wasn't a question. Magnolia's eyes snapped to his. For a moment, something dangerous flickered there, like a cornered animal deciding whether to flee or fight. "Aren't we all running from something, Mr. Crow?" "Thaddeus Crow." "Well, Mr. Crow, we're grateful for your hospitality." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're just travelers caught in unfortunate weather." Thaddeus had heard enough lies in his 47 years to recognize another one. But before he could press further, Clementine cried out, her face twisting in pain. Bertie's hands moved to the girl's belly, feeling for something only experience could detect. "How far along?" Bertie asked. 7 months, maybe 8. Clementine gasped. But the pain started this morning. They're getting stronger. The oldest of the three sisters stepped forward, auburn hair streaked with silver, worry lines deep around her green eyes. I'm Nora. These are my sisters, Ivy and Della. I've birthed 3 children. That girl's in early labor. Thaddeus felt the walls of his carefully controlled world pressing inward. A birth. In his house. With strangers who carried secrets like loaded weapons. We need hot water, Magnolia said, already moving toward his kitchen. Clean cloths. Anything soft for bedding. Now hold on, Thaddeus started, but Bertie cut him off. Unless you want a dead girl and baby on your conscience, you'll help us. Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd seen too much death to waste time on politeness. Outside, the wind screamed like something alive and angry. The wolves howled again. Closer now. Through his small window, Thaddeus caught glimpses of yellow eyes reflecting the lightning. As he reluctantly gathered supplies, he noticed things that didn't add up. Della kept checking the windows, her hand moving instinctively to something hidden beneath her skirt. Ivy hummed under her breath. Not a nervous habit, but the kind of calculated calm that came from training. And Magnolia moved through his kitchen like she was mapping escape routes. What did you do? He asked quietly, setting down a bucket of water heated from the stove. What makes you think we did anything? Nora replied, but her hands shook as she tore clean cloth into strips. Because innocent people don't travel in groups of 6 during storm season. They don't carry themselves like they're expecting trouble. And they sure as hell don't check exits the way your friend there is doing. Magnolia paused in her movements. You're very observant, Mr. Crow. 12 years alone teaches you to notice things. 12 years? Ivy spoke for the first time, her voice softer than her sister's. Why alone? The question hit like a physical blow. Thaddeus felt his chest tighten, memories he'd buried deep trying to claw their way to the surface. Sarah's face. The fire. The choice he'd made that destroyed everything. That's not your concern, he said. But Clementine's sudden scream cut through the tension like a blade. Something's wrong, Bertie said, her face grave. The baby's turned. We need to get her lying down now. As they moved Clementine to his bed, where he'd slept alone for over a decade, Thaddeus caught Magnolia watching him with calculating eyes. You know about birth, she said. I can see it in your face. He did know. God help him. He knew more about bringing life into the world than any man should. But that knowledge came with a price he'd sworn never to pay again. Thunder crashed overhead, and in the flash of lightning that followed, Thaddeus saw something that made his blood freeze. Tracks in the mud outside his window. Boot prints. Fresh ones. They weren't alone in the storm anymore. Thaddeus grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, keeping his body in the shadows. The boot prints were clear in the mud. Too large for any of the women. Too fresh to be from before the storm. Someone had been watching his cabin. Someone who'd followed 6 desperate women through a deadly storm. What is it? Magnolia appeared beside him, her voice barely a whisper. Company, he said, checking the rifle's load. The kind you were hoping to avoid. Her face went pale. How many? At least 2 sets of prints. Maybe more. He turned to face her and saw fear. Real. Bone-deep terror. Replaced the careful mask she'd been wearing. Now you're going to tell me exactly what you're running from. Before she could answer, Clementine screamed again. The sound was raw. Desperate. The kind that would carry through the storm and announce their location to anyone hunting them. We need to muffle her, Della said, producing a leather strap from her bag. If they hear... No. Thaddeus moved between them and the bed. You don't gag a woman in labor, not in my house. You don't understand, Ivy whispered urgently. If they find us here, they'll kill us all, including you. Then start talking. Magnolia closed her eyes, weighing her options as another contraction racked Clementine's body. When she opened them again, Thaddeus saw the look of someone who'd run out of choices. We witnessed something, she said. Something we weren't supposed to see. What kind of something? A murder. The word fell like a stone into still water. 3 nights ago in Silver Creek, a man named Carson Vale. He owned half the territory, had judges and sheriffs in his pocket. We saw him kill a family. Father, mother, 2 small children. Over a land claim. Thaddeus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew that name. Every farmer within 100 miles knew Carson Vale, and feared him. He saw us watching, Nora added, her voice hollow. We've been running ever since. His men, they're not the type to leave witnesses. How many men? 6 that we've seen. Maybe more. Magnolia glanced toward the window. They're professionals. Killers. They won't stop until we're dead. Lightning illuminated the cabin, and in that brief moment, Thaddeus saw his reflection in the window. A man who'd spent 12 years hiding from the world, suddenly faced with the choice between continued isolation and standing against evil. That's when Bertie spoke up from beside Clementine's bed, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The baby's coming now. No more time for talking. But as Clementine pushed, her face contorted in pain and effort. Something wet splashed against the cabin's front window. Too thick to be rain. Too dark to be mud. Thaddeus moved closer and saw the truth that made his hands tighten on his rifle. Blood. Fresh blood, streaming down the glass like a message written in violence. "They're here," he said quietly. And that's when they heard the first gunshot, followed by a man's voice calling through the storm. "We know you're in there, ladies. Come out peaceful and maybe we'll make it quick." But Clementine couldn't be moved. The baby was crowning, and any disruption now would kill them both. They were trapped. 6 women, a man who'd forgotten how to fight, and killers outside who wouldn't hesitate to burn down the cabin with all of them inside. That's when Thaddeus remembered something about himself he'd buried along with everything else. He'd once been a very different kind of man. The voice outside belonged to death itself. Cold, patient, certain. Thaddeus recognized the tone. He'd heard it before, 12 years ago, when different men had come for different reasons but with the same terrible certainty. 5 minutes, the voice continued. Then we start burning. Clementine bit down on a leather strap, her body racked with another contraction. The baby's head was visible now, slick with blood and birth fluid. Bertie's hands worked with desperate efficiency, but there was no rushing nature. 2 minutes more, Bertie whispered. Maybe 3. "We don't have 3 minutes, Della said, checking the load on a small pistol she'd pulled from her boot. "They'll torch the place." Thaddeus moved to his gun cabinet, the one he'd sworn never to open again. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, lay the tools of his former life. A Colt .45, a sawed-off shotgun, and something that made Magnolia's eyes widen when she saw it. "You're military," she breathed. "Was." Thaddeus strapped on the gun belt, muscle memory making his fingers work the buckles without conscious thought. "Long time ago." "What unit?" "The kind that doesn't exist on paper." He pumped the shotgun, the sound sharp and deadly in the confined space. "The kind they send when regular soldiers won't do the job." Another gunshot cracked outside, this one closer. Through the window, Thaddeus saw muzzle flashes in the storm. They were testing distances, getting ready for the assault. "Mr. Crow," Ivy said, her voice strangely calm. "If you were in our position right now, what would you do?" She held her sister's pistol in one hand, Della's knife in the other. "Fight, and probably die protecting strangers, or surrender them to save yourself." The question hung in the air like smoke. Thaddeus looked at each face, Magnolia's desperate hope, the sister's grim determination, Bertie's fierce concentration as she guided new life into a world full of violence. "Tell me in the comments," he muttered to himself. An old phrase from another life. "I need to know which side you'd choose." Because what he decided next would either save them all or get them killed. "Della, take position at the back window. Ivy, you're on the east wall. Nora, stay with Bertie and the girl." Thaddeus moved toward the front door, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded men in impossible situations. "Magnolia, you're with me. I don't know how to—" "You know enough." He handed her a loaded pistol. "Point and shoot. Don't think about it." Outside, the killers were moving closer. Thaddeus could hear them communicating. Short whistles, quick calls that spoke of military training. These weren't common gunfighters. They were professionals like him. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought they were hunting helpless women and a frightened farmer. They had no idea they'd cornered a ghost from the kind of war most people pretended never happened. The first man appeared at the window, his face pressed against the glass to peer inside. Thaddeus put a bullet through his skull before he could call out. The body dropped into the mud with a wet thud. "Now it starts," Thaddeus said, working the shotgun's action. The cabin erupted in gunfire. Bullets splintered wood, shattered glass, filled the air with deadly fragments. Della screamed from the back window, hit, but not down. Ivy returned fire, her shots careful and deliberate. Through it all, Clementine pushed, and Bertie worked, and new life fought to enter a world gone mad with violence. A shadow moved past the broken front window. Thaddeus tracked it with the shotgun, waiting for the perfect moment. When the killer stepped into view, weapon raised, Thaddeus squeezed the trigger. The blast took the man's chest apart. "Two down," he called out. But his celebration was premature, because that's when they heard the sound that changed everything. The crackle of flames. The killers had started a fire against the cabin's back wall. They had minutes before the whole structure went up. Minutes before the smoke overwhelmed them all. And that's when Clementine's baby decided to make its entrance into the world. The baby's cry pierced through gunfire and crackling flames like a sword through silk. Pure, innocent, completely unaware that it had entered a world trying to kill everyone around it. Bertie held the tiny, blood-slicked infant up, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "It's a girl," she whispered, even as smoke began seeping through the floorboards. The fire was spreading faster than Thaddeus had expected. These weren't common criminals. They'd used accelerant, probably oil from their own supplies. Professional killers who came prepared for every scenario. "We need to move," he said, reloading the shotgun with practiced speed. "Back door. Now." "Clementine can't be moved," Bertie protested. "She's lost too much blood. Moving her will. Staying here will kill her for certain." Thaddeus grabbed blankets from his closet, wrapping them around mother and child. "Della, what's your condition?" "Shot in the shoulder. I can move." Her face was pale but determined. "Not my shooting arm." Magnolia appeared at his side, her expensive dress torn and bloodied, but her eyes fierce. "There's something you need to know about us. Now's not the time for... We're not just witnesses." Her voice cut through his protest like a blade. "We're Carson Vale's property, all of us. He owns the brothel where we worked. We weren't just watching that murder. We were there because he ordered us to watch. He wanted us to see what happened to people who crossed him." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "You were supposed to spread the word. Unofficial warnings. But we couldn't." Ivy spoke up from her position near the wall. "When we saw those children, we just couldn't. So you ran. And now he'll never stop hunting us." Nora's voice was hollow. "Because we know too much and we've defied him. In his world, that's a death sentence." The flames reached the main room, licking at the wooden walls with hungry tongues. The heat was becoming unbearable, and smoke filled the air with each breath. Outside, Thaddeus could hear the remaining killers repositioning, waiting for them to run into the open. "How many more out there?" he asked. "At least 4, Magnolia said. "Maybe 6. Thaddeus closed his eyes, calculating odds and options. 4 armed professionals against him, 5 women, and a newborn baby. In an open field, during a storm, with one woman barely conscious from childbirth. He'd faced worse odds, but never with so much innocent life depending on him. If you're enjoying the story, subscribe to the channel." That's when Bertie spoke up, her voice steady despite the chaos. "There's something else, something Magnolia didn't tell you." Magnolia spun around, fear flashing across her face. "Bertie, don't... One of us isn't who she claims to be." Bertie's eyes locked onto Thaddeus's. "One of us has been working for Carson Vale all along, feeding him information, leading him right to us." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Thaddeus looked from face to face. Magnolia's sudden panic, the sister's shocked expressions, Clementine's drugged confusion as she clutched her newborn. "Who?" he asked quietly. But before Bertie could answer, the front wall of the cabin exploded inward. A man stepped through the flames like something born from hell itself. Tall, lean, with eyes that held no mercy and a gun that never seemed to miss. "Ladies," Carson Vale said, his voice cultured and calm despite the inferno around him, "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Carson Vale stood framed by fire like a vision from the deepest pit. His suit was immaculate despite the storm, his silver hair perfectly combed, his smile cold as winter steel. Behind him, 3 more men stepped through the burning doorway, weapons trained on everyone in the room. Now, Vale said, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. "No need for dramatics, Mr. Crow, though I must say, your reputation precedes you. Captain Thaddeus Crow, late of the Unions. Unofficial operations." Thaddeus kept his shotgun steady, but his mind raced. How did Vale know his military background? That information had been buried deeper than any grave. "Surprised I know your history? You shouldn't be. A man doesn't vanish for 12 years without leaving traces." Vale's eyes glittered with malicious intelligence, especially not after the little incident at Millfield. The name hit Thaddeus like a physical blow. Millfield. The mission that had broken him. The choice between saving civilians and completing orders. The choice that had cost him everything. That's right, Vale continued, reading the recognition in Thaddeus's face. I know about the fire, about your wife Sarah, about the child you couldn't save. Magnolia gasped. In all their desperate conversation, she'd never learned the depth of Thaddeus's loss. Behind him, he heard Clementine whisper something to her newborn, instinctively protective. But we're not here for ancient history, Vale said, his tone shifting to business. We're here for my property. 5 women who broke their contracts. 5 women who witnessed something they shouldn't have. 5 women who need to face consequences. 5? Bertie spoke up, still cradling the baby. I count 6 of us here. Vale's smile widened. Do you? Let's see. Magnolia, my finest girl. The 3 sisters who thought they could buy their freedom. Young Clementine with her bastard child. His eyes settled on Bertie with something like affection. And dear Bertie Walsh, my most trusted employee for the past 15 years. The revelation hit like lightning. Bertie, grandmother figure, protector, the one they'd all trusted, worked for Carson Vale. No, Ivy breathed. That's impossible. Not only possible, but essential to my business model. Vale stepped further into the burning room, completely unafraid of Thaddeus's weapon. You see, Bertie has been feeding me information about escape attempts for over a decade. How do you think I always manage to catch my girls before they reach the state line? Magnolia's face twisted with betrayal and rage. You've been reporting on us. All of us. It's a job, Bertie said quietly. But her hands trembled as she held the baby. Just a job. I needed the money. My husband's medicine. My own daughter's debts. But something changed 3 nights ago, Vale continued. When you saw me discipline the Hendricks family, Bertie made an interesting choice. Instead of reporting the escape attempt, she joined it. Thaddeus watched the old woman's face crumble. The weight of her betrayals, past and present, seemed to crush her spirit in real time. Why? Magnolia demanded. Why help us after all these years? Bertie looked down at the newborn in her arms. Because I remembered what it felt like to be innocent. This baby, she didn't choose any of this. None of you did. Vale's laugh was like broken glass. How touching. But redemption doesn't erase 15 years of collaboration. He raised his pistol, aiming directly at Bertie's head. And it certainly doesn't erase the consequences. The flames were consuming the cabin now. Heat so intense it felt like standing inside an oven. Smoke burned their eyes and throats. They had seconds before the structure collapsed entirely. Last chance, Mr. Crow, Vale said. Stand aside, and I'll let you live. These women are coming with me. What they've done requires correction. Thaddeus looked at the faces around him. Magnolia, terrified but defiant. The sisters, holding each other with desperate love. Clementine, weak but protective of her child. And Bertie, tears streaming down her face as she finally faced the cost of her choices. 5 women, 1 baby, all depending on a broken man who'd spent 12 years hiding from exactly this kind of moment. You know what your problem is, Vale, Thaddeus said, adjusting his grip on the shotgun. Enlighten me. You forgot to count the baby. The shotgun blast tore through Carson Vale's chest before he could react. The impact hurled him backward into the flames, his perfect suit igniting like kindling. His scream was brief, cut short by the fire that consumed him with hungry efficiency. His men opened fire immediately. But Thaddeus was already moving. 12 years of isolation hadn't dulled his reflexes. He rolled behind his overturned table, pulling Magnolia down with him as bullets splintered the wood above their heads. Della, Ivy, now! He shouted. The sisters moved like they'd been born to violence. Della's wounded shoulder didn't stop her from putting 2 bullets center mass into the nearest gunman. Ivy flanked left, her shots precise and deadly. In seconds, 2 more of Vale's killers lay dead on the burning floor. The last man turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. The cabin was an inferno now, flames blocking every exit except the way he'd come. He chose the fire over Thaddeus's gun, screaming as the blaze swallowed him whole. We have to go, Thaddeus said, gathering Clementine in his arms. She was weak but conscious, clutching her baby with fierce determination. The whole structure's coming down. They stumbled through the smoke toward the back wall, where Thaddeus kicked out the burning boards with his boots. Cool air rushed in, blessed relief from the suffocating heat. One by one, they escaped into the storm. The The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, the worst of the weather finally passing. In the distance, dawn painted the horizon with pale gold light. They huddled together in the mud, watching 12 years of Thaddeus's carefully built isolation burn to the ground. "Where will you go?" he asked Magnolia. "West. California, maybe. Far enough that Vale's name means nothing." She looked at her companions. Battered, exhausted, but free. "We have money saved, enough for a new start." "All of us?" Della asked, looking pointedly at Bertie. The old woman sat apart from the group, still holding Clementine's baby, tears mixing with rain on her weathered cheeks. "I don't deserve to come with you. After what I've done, you saved us," Clementine said weakly. "In the end, when it mattered, you chose right. 15 years of wrong choices don't disappear because of one night." Thaddeus studied Bertie's face. The guilt, the shame, the desperate hope for forgiveness. He recognized the expression. He'd worn it himself for 12 years. "Maybe not," he said quietly. "But one right choice can start to balance the scales. If you let it." Magnolia stood, brushing mud from her torn dress. "You could come with us, you know. All of you. Start fresh somewhere new." The offer hung in the morning air like mist. Thaddeus looked at his burning cabin, then at the 6 women who'd changed everything in a single night. For 12 years he'd believed isolation was safety, that walls could keep out pain. But walls burned, and sometimes the only real protection came from standing with others against the darkness. "I've got business to finish here first," he said finally. "Vale had partners, other men who profit from misery. Someone needs to make sure they understand the consequences." Magnolia smiled, the first genuine expression he'd seen from her. "The union's unofficial operations?" "Something like that." They gathered the supplies they could salvage and started toward the road. As they walked, Clementine named her daughter Sarah, after a woman she'd never met, whose memory had helped save them all. Bertie walked beside them, no longer apart. Forgiveness, Thaddeus realized, wasn't something you earned all at once. It was something you chose to accept, day by day, choice by choice. 6 months later, a letter arrived at the new cabin Thaddeus had built. It was postmarked from Sacramento, written in careful script. "Sarah took her first steps yesterday. Bertie says she looks like she'll be a fighter. Thank you for reminding us that some battles are worth winning. M." If you enjoyed the story, consider sending a super chat to help bring more stories like this. Now click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one, with secrets so dark they'll change how you see justice forever. Click on the video now.